Trauma bonding. It is the emotional state created between two people where one person is the aggressor and the other is receptive by deception to that aggression. This forms a toxic bond with specific attachment styles in individuals that alter the course of a person's behavior. And this behavior goes from being secure to becoming attached, avoidant, anxious, dismissive. The abusive individual manipulates other individuals into dismissing the abuse by diminishing the effects of abuse quickly through stimulating the individual's needs for acceptance with reward. Now, this cycle is repetitive as the abusive person creates a false sense of security within the other person. Now, the abuser uses intermittent reinforcement stealthily in a way that has the target of abuse abandoning the full use of their personal autonomy. The goal of the trauma bond is to have the abused to become completely and totally dependent on the abuser and subject the abuser's every whim. The trauma bond forms when the individual's perceptions of their abuser is no longer seen as equal. It's no longer an equal partnership, but instead the abuser is placed in high regard where they can do no wrong, and all wrong is subject to interpretation of the target of abuse, who learns to excuse, minimize, enable, and diminish the abuser's actions. The abuser slowly and systematically forces their target into submission that reinforces a childlike state of dependence and reliance in the mind of the abused. The only way to break the bond of trauma is when one person leaves the relationship. This usually is the abuser, as the abuser abandons their target to deal with the feelings of abandonment all on their own. This leads to emotional shock and can cause a freeze response that leads the abused to live a life in grief and mourning that affects them in their personal relationships and working relationships. The way to heal from a trauma bond is to, in my opinion, reverse engineer the symptoms by understanding the behavior of the abuser as well as the behavior behind the abuse. Now, for the trauma bond to gain a foothold, there must be certain criteria in place, and each criteria builds upon the other. These criteria are like foundational stones that build upon each other to form a wall, a barrier that separates an individual from their personal individuation. The trauma bond forces a person to lose their identity, and to gain their identity back, that wall must come down brick by brick. These bricks act as pillars, as each pillar supports the pillar before it, and together these bricks that form a pillar form the trauma bond. The trauma bond falls apart when one pillar crumbles. There are 7 pillars of trauma bonding, and they are as follows. Love bombing. Love bombing is when an individual confesses their feelings for another before the relationship has time to develop trust and respect. The thing about love bombing is that it creates a feeling of trust and respect way before someone has time to show that they are trusting and respectful. In love bombing, it is just words, as love bombing may be accompanied by dates and vacations, flowers, gifts, dinners, and oh, that cute little puppy. But dang it, these are superficial accomplishments to let you know that when it really counts, this toxic person is telling on themselves. Because trust and respect is established when someone is proven worthy of your affection. When someone can go to the distance with you physically and emotionally, they don't abandon you when you need them the most. This is how trust and respect is established. When you have someone who supports your decisions, regardless of their own, who rallies and champions for you, and when you have the moral support of someone in a consistent way, this person is showing you that you can trust them and you can rely on them, and they are earning your respect. This person is someone whom is worthy of your affection and attention. Anyone who does not show you that they want you in their life because they genuinely care, as they are willing to go the distance for you and with you, well, they have no right to say that they love you. And in fact, they are insulting your integrity and your intelligence. The next pillar is future faking. The abuser lies to you in attempts to solidify their love bombing. They promise you the world, which they can't deliver on. They never make an attempt at even a follow-through. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And for some, there is always a reason why they can't do what they said they were going to do right now. They'll get to it eventually. Quit being so hard on them. This future faking is manipulative, and it is a setup for what is about to come. Now, in future faking, sometimes lies are confessed as lies are often found out, but the strongest form of deception is in the form of gaslight, and the lies in this stage are what set up the gaslight for later, because the lies are a precursor of what is to follow. It's a setup. If you let one or two lies go now, if you are forgiving of the misgivings now, then you will fall prey easily to the gaslight that you will never see coming. The next pillar is blame shifting. The abuser will critique and criticize and scrutinize every little thing about their targets. They will belittle individuals behind closed doors, even in public. This is an attempt to break down the foothold of self-reliance one has on themselves. The target of abuse will question their own decision. They will question their own mind. They will question their own reality as they will become doubtful within it. The criticisms of their abuser will wear them down to the point where one might even seek medical attention, as depression and anxiety become the norm. This only exasperates and frustrates the abuser more, as they will never, ever, ever take responsibility for any wrongdoing and harm they cause another person. The next pillar is gaslighting. This is where an individual may do some dastardly things against you, and they will be dismissive when you call them out on it. Gaslighting is worse than lying. It is considered bullshitting. Gaslighting works because it is used when the individual has your trust and respect. That's what the love bombing stage was for. And the gaslighting stage is to get you to relinquish your resolve for you, as the abuser needs you to abandon the trust and love you have for yourself. The abuser needs you to abandon the unconditional love you have for yourself and give it to the abuser. Now, these pillars of assault will continue as the abuser dwindles your resolve until you have reached to the point where the next pillar sets the stage of the relationship. You give up complete and total control. When you reached a point in your relationship with the abuser where you are so confused, so confounded that you avoid conflict with them just to keep the peace because you don't like how the abuser makes you feel when you go against them, when you stand up for yourself and for what you know to be true, when you stand up for your right to be loved and cared for in a healthy way, when you stand up for yourself in self-respect, and that self-respect is then diminished, you end up feeling defeated, deflated, and after the go around with your abuser each time, you ask yourself, why did I even bother? Giving up your self-control is never an easy thing, but in your mind it's necessary to keep yourself safe and to just keep the peace. But for the abuser, it is a way for them to feel validated. They don't feel what they have done to you is ever wrong. They got what they wanted. They have now control over you, and this is their end goal. You keeping the peace by not questioning the abuser, you will just cycle through the pillars and the patterns of abuse, and you will go round and round and round as you learn to crave the love bombing, ignore and put up with everything else, just so that you can feel worthy in the abuser's eyes. The love bombing reinforces that you are worthy of existing, and you never realize that you have become a hollow shell as you make your end-all be-all. Who you are is now centered around the abuser. You feel like your soul's purpose is to exist just for the abuser, and there is no way of escaping this. Friends and family have tried to talk to you. They've tried their best, but to no avail. Nothing has worked. The only way to escape is to have those pillars crumble, but they won't crumble until you lose yourself. You have to lose yourself to find yourself. And in finding yourself, you have to let go of the identity that you have created in the narcissist. The next pillar is integration. When you give up control over yourself, you then begin to shift your identity to the identity of the abuser. This is when the abuser has complete control of your thoughts, your actions, your sleeping patterns, your comings, your goings. They control what you wear, who your friends are, what you eat, and they will even control your appearance. Everything you do and you say and think is under the control of the abuser. And this is when you acquiesce and live from their perspective of life. You become the object of their affection and attention. You embody this objectification. You lose empathy for yourself, as all your energy is reserved for empathy for your abuser. Now, most people do not fully and completely integrate, but when the abuser is successful, the targets of abuse become addicted to the patterns of abuse, and this is what allows the abuser to have permanent jurisdiction over someone's autonomy. The next pillar is the pillars of the cycles repeating. All throughout the relationship, the patterns rinse and repeat. One pillar of the trauma bond may last longer than the other, and there might be a disordered arrangement of these cyclical patterns between these 7 pillars. But when the target of abuse has lost themselves within the identity of their abuser, they then begin to thrive on the repeated patterns, craving for the fundamental pattern that initiated it all, love bombing. The individual who has succumbed to the abuser in every way may then even create a situation that creates chaos between themselves and their abuser, just so that they can go back to the love bombing stage and feel loved and appreciated, as the patterns of abuse cycle back always to the first initial stages. Trauma bonding isn't just an emotional attachment that someone forms with another person. This is a system of abuse that creates chemical dependence on the feelings one has for another while in a trauma bond situation. The abuse actually forms hormonal responses to which the body itself craves, to which an individual must seek out in order to have those hormonal responses met. Cortisol is the stress hormone, and dopamine alleviates it. The abused individual is literally addicted to their abuser and cannot get out on their own. The trauma bond breaks abruptly when the abuser has grown tired of their game and they leave the abused individual in a state of shock and emotional chaos, alone, leaving them to deal with their pain by themselves. When the abused individual is left on their own, they go through the stages of shock and are seemingly impossible to overcome. This is where the abused may beg the abuser for a second chance, and this plays into the hands of the abuser, who then thrives on knowing that they still have control. It is when they know that they have control, this is when they devalue and discard the people that they abuse. The abuser has no more need for control, because maintaining that state of control is very draining for them. It's costly and it's boring. The abuser loves the challenge, and once that challenge is accomplished, the thrill of pursuit and control is gone. The abuser has no need of keeping up a facade. The race is won. The competition is over. The only reason why the abuser comes back after discarding their targets is because they have no source of control, or they desire to try to control their targets again now that the individual is on their way to gaining their autonomy back, or they have already gained that control over themselves back. Many people who are discarded by their abusers are forever scarred by the narcissist, because they seek the dopamine fix some other way. Some seek out toxic relationships, or they seek other ways to cope that feed that hormonal addiction. You see this by eating disorders, sexual promiscuity, overspending, gambling, living lifestyles that gives them that adrenaline rush. They are always searching to fill that void, not realizing that that void can be filled by searching deep within and finding the light of love that has never gone. It's just faded. Healing the trauma bond is not an easy feat, and it takes a long time to overcome. Finding healthy methods of coping through therapy and coaching practices that actually bridge the gap to self-awareness are promising avenues of healing. Discovering oneself through authenticity and integrity brings back the authority to reclaim one's self-identity again. This shift allows one to take back control, to allow love to be the ruling authority. Understanding self-awareness is an exercise in self-love. And when one loves themselves fully and completely, well, one discovers that they are their own best friend. And they only allow healthy, healing, loving, and mutually beneficial relationships to flourish as they are fostered in the heart. By spiritually becoming in tune to one's body, mind, and soul, one discovers a love that is rich in empathy, compassion, and unconditional forgiveness that is soothing to one's spirit. Finding oneself internally allows one to discover the love that is eternally felt, as that love is something that we are all seeking, and that love has a name, Jesus. So thank you for watching the 7 Pillars of the Trauma Bond. If you would like help in overcoming narcissism, please feel free to visit my sister site, ko-fi.com/ShannonLynn, as I have programs and literature for you to use in your own personal healing methods. Please remember to like and subscribe to this channel, as your support helps this channel to grow. So with that said, my friends, go with Jesus and go make your day great.